What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college football. And today we are talking the New Year's Eve 5-game slate, capped off by the playoff matchup. First one of the second round that'll take place tonight. But before we get there, if you like this content, please consider subscribing to the channel or leaving a like on the video. Those two things help a small channel like this immensely. It gets us in front of new people and really just allows us to continue making content. So thank you if you've done that. It matters a lot. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. We will be discussing sides and totals as we break down these games. So just want to get that out there. But 5 games on deck, not as many opt-outs as normal. It's going to be a great slate. Let's dive right into it. Kicking things off, we have the ReliaQuest Bowl between Vanderbilt and Iowa. This game is being played in Tampa. 4.5-point spread in favor of Vanderbilt right now. The total comes in at 45 points. In this game, we've seen a little line movement towards Iowa through the last day, but ultimately there hasn't been any changes. Coaching staffs are pretty consistent for these two teams. There's no major opt-outs in the game outside of Eli Stowers at tight end for Vandy. Not very many injuries either. Iowa has a couple guys in the secondary questionable, TJ Hall and Cohen Entringer, but it looks like we're going to see mostly the starters for these teams. To get here, Vanderbilt, awesome year for them. They beat LSU, Missouri, Tennessee, Utah State among bowl eligible teams. A lot of other quality wins in conference, as well as Virginia Tech. They blew them out, and they only lost to Alabama and Texas. Texas was by a field goal. Alabama, they lose 30-14, but Alabama literally scored in the waning seconds of that game to put the margin where it was. As for Iowa, beat Penn State by a point. They blew out Minnesota and they blew out Nebraska. Those are their bowl eligible wins. They did lose to Iowa State by a field goal, Indiana by 5, Oregon by 2, and USC by 5. Very close in all their losses. Probably should have beat USC. They had a 55% post-game win expectancy. But let's dive into player personnel. Vanderbilt goes as Diego Pavia goes. He completed 71% of his passes, 9.5 yards per attempt, 24 big-time throws, 11 turnover-worthy plays, and 17 sacks. The big plays were amazing for Pavia, whether that came scrambling or through the air. He did have a few more negative plays than we've seen in the past, but I think you'll take the good with the bad with Pavia, especially when he is the engine that wins you games, because you're not really working with a lot around him on offense. The O-line was a mess. It's the worst tackle tandem in the SEC with Isaiah Glass and Bryce Henderson. The interior wasn't that much better outside of their center, Jordan White. He is a very good player. But the mobility and the scrambling and his ability to buy time masked so many problems. And then you go to the run game. He's the engine of that. Led the team with 826 yards. He honestly is the reason we saw a lot of room for McKylan Young and Cedric Alexander, and the reason they were efficient because you had to account for Pavia. The O-line was 86th in run blocking. And then this receiving core he worked with, Stowers is great. He's going to be an NFL tight end. He's not going to play here. But what he did with Trey Richardson and Junior Sherrill and Richie Hoskins, I mean, is incredible. Trey Richardson is a transfer from Washburn. These guys aren't supposed to be successful. You're going to use Cole Spence a little more in this game because Stowers is out, but he played quite a bit actually because of the 12 personnel stuff Vandy used. But ultimately, you stop Pavia and you will stop this team. The question is, can Iowa do it? They have not faced a lot of mobile quarterbacks. The ones that have been most successful were pocket passers, Ethan Kaliakmanis, Fernando Mendoza, and Jaden Maeva. Pavia can do it. It's just not his preferred method of victory. Very few teams have been able to run on Iowa, with the exception of Oregon. Iowa has a really good defense, especially up front. Ethan Hurkett, Max Llewellyn, and Aaron Graves are awesome. Jonah Pace is a little bit weaker at defensive tackle, but Carson Scherer and Jaden Montgomery have gotten better throughout the year at linebacker. Pretty good safeties in Xavier Nwankpa. Entringer is banged up, so that's worth noting. Corners, very good with TJ Hall, Lutmer, and Deshaun Lee. It's a data point that's hard to get a gauge on because we just haven't seen it a lot against Iowa. Not very many mobile quarterbacks on the schedule. But ultimately, I believe in this defensive coordinator and this staff, and I think they can do enough to slow Pavia down in this game. Meanwhile, on the other side, you're going to see Mark Gronowski under center. He's a game managing quarterback. The big thing with him is he doesn't cause a lot of negative plays, only 7 turnover worthy plays and 15 sacks, which is good. You're not really working with a lot of skill position talent, but the offensive line is the best in the country. They won the Joe Moore. I think every player on this unit is probably going to get drafted at some point, and it's highlighted by Jennings Dunker. It's an amazing offensive line. And the run game is pretty solid. They got Kamari Moulton back midseason, 5 yards per carry. Jazz Patterson, Xavier Williams, they'll change the pace. And even like returning a Reese Vanderzee, who's, I won't call him a difference maker, but he's probably their best receiver. He at least gives you like a halfway decent threat in the receiving game. But you're going to take this O-line up against Vanderbilt's defensive line. This is the biggest mismatch in the game, especially up front. The edges are actually okay for Vandy, Corday Sidnor, Miles Capers, but inside, they run too many guys in there. It's a 4-man rotation. Joshua Singh and Jalen Stone are the best, but teams have been able to run on this Vandy defense. Langston Patterson, Brian Longwell are decent linebackers. The secondary, I mean, they're kind of composed of all above average players, but no true difference makers. And they're going to be needed in run defense. Martell Height, Colby Taylor, Randon Fontenette, Marlon Sewell, CJ Hurd. Iowa should be able to move the ball on this defense. They've moved the ball reasonably well against better defenses they face in the Big Ten. Special teams, both great, but this leads us to an Iowa position. We took a +6 yesterday when it popped very briefly. 5.5s are still out there, but juiced. And you can play a 4.5. We think there's value on all of those numbers. Take the best one you can, of course. We currently have the total a little closer to 50 points. There's a little bit of value there too, but prefer the Iowa side in this game. Next up, Duke takes on Arizona State in the Sun Bowl. This is in El Paso. Duke's a 3-point favorite. Arizona State, they come in as the underdog, but the total is 47.5. And in this game, there's a lot more opt-outs. The big ones for Duke are Brian Parker at tackle, Vincent Anthony on the edge, and Chandler Rivers at corner. A few other players have been injured, like Trey Freeman at linebacker, but you're not looking at any coaching changes for Duke. Arizona State doesn't have any either, but they have essentially all their good players not playing, led by Jordan Tyson, Sam Levitt at QB, Raleek Brown at running back, and Shimon Mateer at tight end. Both of their tackles. And then on defense, multiple linebackers are going to sit out of this game, led by Keyshawn Elliott. 3 of your starting secondary players, Adrian Wilson, Xavier Alford, they're not going to play in this game. It's kind of rough. And your best edge in Clayton Smith. So, skeleton crew for Arizona State. To get here, their best win was against Texas Tech. They did that with Texas Tech on a backup QB. Barely squeaked by TCU and Iowa State. They lost to Mississippi State, blown out by Utah. And then towards the end of the year, their quarterback was hurt. So you get beat by Arizona, double digits. There's not much to be said there. Duke was all over the place. I mean, this team beat Clemson, probably shouldn't have, beat Wake Forest, beat Virginia in the conference title. They also lost to Virginia earlier in the year. They lost to UConn by 3 points. They lost to Tulane. This team was all over the board. They barely beat North Carolina. You got to live and die with the roller coaster ride and the turnovers that is the Duke offense. When you break it down, Darian Mensah had an awesome season. He had some NFL looks, but he decided to come back to school. 67.5% completion percentage, 8 yards per attempt, 24 big-time throws, 16 turnover-worthy plays. Luckily, those weren't all converted to interceptions, but definitely had some fumbles. That wasn't good either. As far as the rest of the group goes, good offensive line, probably a little weaker today because Brian Parker is out. Good skill players. They go 5 deep there. And they have a good run game with freshman 4-star Nate Shepard. He was at 5.4 yards per carry. Cooper Barkate reached 1,000 yards receiving. Sean Brown was over 650. Samir Hagan's over 450. They have a good tight end. This is a legit Duke offense that was only limited by their turnovers. Now, facing Arizona State's defense today, they should be able to throw the ball. Arizona State's strength was coverage, but they just lost 3 starters. So they're returning Miles Rouser and Kendrick Breedlove. I don't really know who they're going to potentially put out there. Montana Warren and Kyan McDonald played the most this year, but they listed a freshman Ben Alifio Lili as a starter. He has no snaps, and he's like a middling 3-star. I don't know. The pass rush for Arizona State wasn't any good to begin with, and then they just lost Clayton Smith. So I don't really think the Brian Parker departure for Duke is going to matter all that much. You kind of have one guy to worry about, Justin Watley. Linebacker room is weakened by the departures. Jordan Crook is a stud. But yeah, I think Duke's probably going to be able to throw the ball on the skeleton crew secondary. Meanwhile, Arizona State, Jeff Sims took over for Sam Leavitt. There have been rumors that they're going to use their 4-star freshman, Cameron Dyer, at least in packages. I hope they do. He's a really high recruit, elite dual threat ability. That's basically what Sims gives you, but you then have the untapped upside because we know Sims can't throw the ball. Maybe this Dyer kid can provide a little bit more through the air. And it's not been all Sims' fault. 10 drops for him on his targets alone. That's over 11% of his on-target passes. But we know what the deal is. 52% completion, 5.9 yards per attempt. It is what it is. In this game, infrastructure is probably going to be a little bit worse. Both tackles are gone. Interior is kind of a mess for this team. Kyle Scott's decent. Wade Helton was not very good at center. They split left guard, and we don't really know who's going to play tackle right now. One of the potential replacements of Big Bo, he's been hurt too. So that's a mess. They lose their 2 best skill position players, Raleek Brown and Jordan Tyson. Backup running backs Kanye Udo and Kyson Brown are both hurt. So Demarius Robinson, he's probably going to have to play. He's 28 yards. Jason Brown Jr. has 17 yards. And then the receiving game, like this receiving unit was 113th in efficiency with Tyson. Now he's gone. Malik McClain has now stepped up. Derek Eusebio is a walk-on. I don't know why he plays so much. And then Cameron Harpole at tight end, he has 77 yards. He's supposed to replace Mateer. Now Duke's defense is horrible. Their strength is up front. So if they could potentially get by this Arizona offensive line, that's their path, especially because the secondary is so bad. They were 108th in coverage. Best player is not going to play in this game, Chandler Rivers. 2 kind of average guys in Francois and Weaver, but you're going to start 2 freshmen on the back end more than likely. I don't know, man. It's putting a lot on the edge rushing group, Wesley Williams and Kevin O'Connor. They can do it because we just haven't seen this Arizona State offensive line, and they're going to play 2 new guys. And ultimately, we probably don't need a lot of stops. Plus, are either of these Arizona State QBs capable of exploiting Duke's secondary? They're running QBs. So a lot favors Duke in this game. Special teams, the gap is massive. Arizona State's not a good special teams team, especially kicking. We played Duke minus a 2.5. You could play a 3. All of those numbers are fine. We make it outside that. Total we have at 52, so a little value towards the over. It's kind of predicated on Arizona State's ability to score. Texas, Michigan, Citrus Bowl in Orlando. Texas is favored by a score, a touchdown. The total is 48.5. We took Texas at a 5.5 when the Sharon Moore news broke. I don't feel great about it. He is the main coaching change in this game, but it looks like they've been rallying around him. They didn't have as many opt-outs as I thought. Derek Moore, Jayshon Barham, Giovanni El-Hadi, those are the only ones. 2 edges and a guard. There's a lot more opt-outs on Texas. They've had a mass exodus in the portal of skilled players. DeAndre Moore at receiver. Their top 3 running backs coming into the year, led by Baxter and Wisner. And then a ton of opt-outs on defense. Both are starting linebackers, Hill and Leafow. 2 edge rushers, Moore and Burke. 3 starters in the secondary, Toff, Williams, and Gullibo. It's been a mess. Michigan has a couple more injuries, mainly Ernest Hausman. That might not be an injury. I think it's a personal issue, but he's a linebacker. And then Mason Curtis in the secondary. Those are 2 defensive guys. Andrew Sprague he's an offensive lineman. So anyway, to get here, Texas lost to Ohio State, Florida, and Georgia, crushed their hopes and dreams in the playoffs. But they have some good wins. Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M. That's 2 playoff teams and 1 on the cusp of a playoff. But it wasn't always pretty. They barely beat Kentucky, 3 points there. Probably should have lost to Mississippi State. Needed some late game heroics on a kick return to get there. But it wasn't any better for Michigan. Michigan's best win is probably Washington. Otherwise, they beat Nebraska and Northwestern, losing to Oklahoma, USC, and Ohio State all by double digits. This team also barely beat Purdue. But it's a great game because we have both young QBs in the contest. Arch Manning got a lot better throughout the season, and the infrastructure just wasn't what it should have been. He took 22 sacks, but the pressure rate was 38%. His completion percentage was 61%, but his receivers dropped 21 balls. That was 8.5% of his on-target passes. Kind of hard to work with. In the O-line, they returned one starter. It was DJ Campbell. He was solid. Only one of the replacements was solid as well. That was Trevor Gooseby. And Brandon Baker, Connor Robertson were decent, but I mean, they basically had a black hole at guard the entire year. They tried Nick Brooks. He's incapable. Connor Stroh, he's now in the portal. Cole Hudson was a steadying force, and he was only average. So that was kind of a mess. It got better, but it was messy. They couldn't run the ball, partially, I imagine, because of that. They also fired their running backs coach, probably has something to do with all the guys in the portal. Now you're going to redshirt four-star freshman Christian Clark. He's only played 109 snaps. Fortunately, the receiving game is pretty intact, even with DeAndre Moore gone, Ryan Wingo, Parker Livingston, Emmett Mosley, all very productive when they were healthy. Jack Endry's quality tight end in the receiving game as well. Michigan's defense lost their two best edge rushers. Probably not looking at as much juice with TJ Guy and Cameron Brandt. They are good inside, especially with Benny and Pierce. Jimmy Roller's also an elite linebacker. But with Hausman leaving the team, you've had a drop off to Cole Sullivan. So even their run defense, I think, is a little bit worse. In the secondary, this group should be pretty good, even with Mason Curtis down. The replacement is presumably Jaden Mangum. He's very experienced. And then like Jair Hill and Brandon Hilleman are awesome. I don't know how much success Texas has offensively. I think they will have a fair amount with some of the upfront departures, but I'm not sure this is enough to like put up 30 points. On Michigan, offense actually mirrored Texas in a lot of ways. Underwood at a 61% completion percentage. Part of the reason it was low, his receivers dropped 27 passes. That was 13% of his on-target balls. He took 19 sacks. Pressure rate was a little better than what Arch had to deal with. But all in all, a lot of the same underlying statistics. One of the differences, Bryce Underwood ran a little more than Arch this year, but even Arch is capable of running. The infrastructure, a little bit better on the offensive line, but you're losing one of your guards. And with Sprague not practicing, you could be looking at two replacements. Probably Brady Norton and Nathan Afobe. That's not ideal, but you still have Blake Frazier, Jake Garnera. Both of them were solid. O-line is probably decent, maybe a little worse than we saw in the regular season. Skill players have a chance to be a lot better. Jordan Marshall's back practicing. He's awesome. A difference-making running back, 6.2 yards per carry. Part of the reason the pass game struggled was they kept throwing Samaj Morgan out there, who's awful. He could not catch a pass. By the time they inserted Andrew Marsh into the lineup, it was kind of too late, but he was awesome. And he's going to be really hard for this Texas defense to cover, man. 641 yards for him. Donovan McCulley is capable as well. You've got multiple tight ends. I think Michigan can actually move the ball if they're not getting in their own way. They were just in their own way so much this season. And Texas, just very thin. Secondary is probably going to have to start Xavier Filsaime and Kobe Black in place of Toph and Muhammad. We've seen that already this year. Both Muhammad and Toph missed time. It was a disaster when those guys had to play. Now, maybe they move and get extra looks at five-star freshman Cade Phillips or four-star sophomore Warren Robinson. That could be something they do too. But ultimately, that secondary is weak. This is kind of a weakness on weakness. Michigan was not a dynamic passing attack. Do we think they have enough juice to beat Texas? Because I don't think the strength on strength, that run game versus Texas up front is going to decide the game. Even with Moore and Burke out, Texas has Colin Simmons and Lance Jackson on the edge. Those are great players. Simmons was actually the best edge rusher they had to begin with. And then their interior is intact. Special teams good for both teams. We have about 1.5 of closing line value right now. I'm a little worried about the Texas opt-outs. I won't lie. I don't think I would play this at 7 today, but I already played it, which is how we get to the bet moniker on the screen. But I'm nervous. I won't lie to you. As for the total, we have this coming in well above 50. There is some value here, especially with both QBs. And it largely just comes down to defensive absences. Michigan has 4 starters. Texas is 7, 6, there could be a drop-off. Nebraska, Utah. This is the Las Vegas Bowl, played in Las Vegas. Obviously, a lot closer to Utah, but still not really a home environment. Anyway, 14.5-point spread in favor of Utah, 51 total. This game, a lot of key opt-outs. Dylan Raiola, he was already injured, but he transferred. Gunnar Gatula has had surgery. He was a tackle. Emmett Johnson to the NFL at running back. Deshaun McCullough off the edge. Those are your Nebraska opt-outs. For Utah, both edges, Logan Fano and John Henry Daly, as well as both tackles, Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano. For coaching changes, Utah is down their head coach, Kyle Whittingham. Seemed like he kind of got pushed out, kind of left on his own will. They had the successor in waiting, so he actually took the Michigan job. And then Nebraska fired their DC, John Butler, as well as a number of position coaches, including Raiola's relatives. So that's how we get here. But anyway, Nebraska, tough season, only bowl eligible wins. Cincinnati and Northwestern only beat Cincinnati by 3-2. Only beat Northwestern by a touchdown. Just didn't live up to expectations. Utah had a pretty good season. They crushed Cincinnati, crushed Arizona State. Their only losses came to Texas Tech and BYU, and they probably should have beaten BYU. But as we come into this game, Utah just has the advantages at a lot of positions, mainly QB. Their QB's not hurt. Devin Dampier, he was solid as long as he wasn't thrown into pure passing situations, and we really only saw that against Texas Tech. 63% completion, 10 turnover-worthy plays, 8 sacks, just no negatives to his game. As far as like negative plays, I mean. And offensive line is the biggest question in this game. This was a weird unit to begin with because they used 6 offensive linemen more than any team in the country. You just lost your 2 best ones. On one hand, okay, you're only really making 1 replacement because you had so much experience. But 2, that was kind of your base personnel. Can you even do that anymore? Or do you have to change the offense? And the interior was not the best unit to begin with. It was kind of just Jaron Kump. So those are questions. Utah's offensive line probably takes a little step back, but I'm not sure it's going to matter against Nebraska. And part of the reason is you have so much dynamic talent among the skill players, particularly in the run game. They'll put Bird Ficklin in there. He had over 500 yards rushing. He barely played. Dampier was at 687. Wayshawn Parker, he's at 931. You have change of pace backs. You actually have decent receivers, and they use so much weird personnel because you have Dallin Bentley and J.J. Buchanan both playing tight end. They use defensive players like Snowden and Barden and Benny on offense occasionally. It's just really confusing. And Nebraska's defense was atrocious. That's why they fired their DC. They're 127th in pass rush, not very good defending the run either. That's what Utah wants to do. Especially in the middle, like Judy, Van Poppel, Davis, these were liabilities. You've a good linebacking room, but part of the reason is like they're efficient tackling, but by the time you get to the linebacking core, you're already 4 yards up the field. Secondary is a strength for Nebraska. They don't really have any opt-outs there. Syer Wright, Deshaun Singleton are 2 of their studs, but I'm not really even sure Utah tests this outside of a couple situational things. And then like they're probably going to make Nebraska play heavy personnel on defense more often, taking one of these guys off the field, one of their secondary players. So a lot of advantages there. But I'm a little interested in Nebraska's offense. TJ Lateef was not bad. Didn't play a ton, but 62% completion, 7.6 yards per attempt, 4 big-time throws, only 2 turnover-worthy plays and 3 sacks. I mean, he's not as dynamic as a passer of Raiola, but he doesn't have the negative plays Raiola has either. The offense can actually like string together drives. Whereas Raiola will bring you 30 yards up the field, but then he'll take a 15-yard sack and you have to punt. It's a little more steady with Lateef. So we'll see. Offensive line's actually shockingly good for Nebraska considering all the injuries. Great interior with Evans, Spindler, and Latovsky. It's helped them run the ball. Emmett Johnson is off to the NFL. They did not really use a backup, and they've listed 4 guys as co-starters this week. But behind the offensive line with so much prep, I kind of think Ives, Mosey, Nelson can have some success. Plus Lateef is a little bit mobile himself. When they do throw, Neziah Hunter, Ja'Cory Barney, and Dane Key are a solid receiving room. Won't say it's difference-making, But Nasiah Hunter, 617 yards, led the team. They were 44th in efficiency there. Utah's defense lost their two edges, and there's an enormous drop to Cash Dillon in Holtzclaw. The edge group was their only above-average unit. Their interior was already leaky. Now you're just removing your two best players. There is going to be a drop-off to some degree. So I kind of think Nebraska scores a little bit. Not to the same degree that Utah scores, but they need to cover 14.5 points. So we're actually showing some value on Nebraska, a good special teams unit for them. I'm not quite there. I'm going to see how the beginning of the day goes and then potentially make a play here. But I'm also kind of interested in an over. If Latif can move the ball in this Utah defense, we make this at 55. So something worth watching. We'll debate this. Last game. The college football playoff is here again, round 2. It's the Cotton Bowl between Miami and Ohio State. Currently, 9-point spread, maybe some 9.5 trickling out there. I see a few that are juiced. 40-point total. This game doesn't have any injuries, doesn't have any opt-outs. It's actually a very clean game for both teams. Brian Hartline is going to leave. He was the OC for this team. Ryan Day announced he's going to call plays here. That's the only real wrinkle to this. But we've seen these teams in action recently. Miami had a first-round playoff game against Texas A&M in pretty windy conditions. And that was a game they rightfully won. They dominated with their defensive line. They dominated in the trenches on both sides of the ball. This came down to Mark Fletcher's ability to run, paved the way from that offensive line. And then their pass rush got home on Marcel Reed for 6 sacks. They pressured him 18 times. They also had 4 drops in the game. That definitely didn't help, but some of those passes were not on target from Reed. I'm sure affected by the wind. But it still ended up being a close contest because Miami missed 3 field goals. Blame the elements if you want, but the only way Texas A&M is still even live at the end of that game is because of those missed field goals. Turnovers hurt A&M, 2 interceptions, and a strip sack fumble, in addition to the 6 sacks taken in 4 drops. It's just a messy game from the Aggies. Other than that, good wins for Miami against Notre Dame, South Florida, losses to Louisville and SMU. Largely outcoached in both, so there have been blips on the radar. For Ohio State, we saw them play Indiana in the Big Ten Championship. They lose by a field goal with a 56% post-game win expectancy. There were a lot of similarities in this game when you look at both teams. You had 2 interceptions, 1 on each side. That resulted in a field goal for Indiana and a touchdown for Ohio State. Both of them were tipped. We had a missed field goal on both sides. The difference was we had a turnover on down for Ohio State, a 4th and 1 at the Indiana 5-yard line where they had 3 plays to get 3 yards. Both teams did allow a lot of pressure. 11 pressures on Say, and he took 5 sacks. 12 pressures on Mendoza. He only took 3 sacks. And the better passing statistics under pressure went to Mendoza. Both teams actually had to bench offensive linemen in this game. So it was ugly. That's how you get to a 10-13 score. But Ohio State did finish with a 56% post-game win expectancy. It was kind of a weak schedule other than that. They played Texas in week 1, but here are the teams they beat soundly. Grambling State, Ohio, Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Penn State, the skeleton crew, Penn State, then Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers. Like, they were just holding guys out. Think like week 18 in the NFL. They were doing that for essentially the whole month of November until they got to Michigan. Carnell Tate and other guys they could afford to hold out. So good QB play. Carson Beck, really, he had an awesome season. 74% completion percentage, 8.5 yards per attempt. It's only marred by the negative plays, and he actually didn't have a lot of them. 10 turnover-worthy plays converted to 10 interceptions. That's an unsustainably high rate. He ran bad there. Only 10 sacks. Offensive line is great for this team. Led by Francis Malinois. This is a top 10 unit in the country. They go 6 deep. They're splitting left guard with McCoy and Samson Okunlola, and it's not because one of them is bad. They just have so many good players. They're trying to rotate them in. That helped pave the way for Mark Fletcher against A&M, who has a good defensive line. Mark Fletcher now healthy. He had 172 yards rushing. He's dynamic. Malachi Toney is the other player they need to worry about on Ohio State. That is, he did only have 22 yards against A&M, but still found a way to score. They used him on the ground. He nearly has 1,000 yards receiving this year. He's at 992. Miami needs to find ways to stop it or to get him in space. Ohio State needs to find ways to stop him because Keelan Marion, CJ Daniels, and tight end Elijah Lofton probably just aren't beating you. And getting to Ohio State's defense, this unit is elite. Very good up front. They have an awesome D-line with Caden Curry, Kenyatta Jackson, and Caden McDonald. They've been winning one-on-ones. If there's a weakness, it's that other defensive tackle spot between Malone and Houston, but I wouldn't even call it a weak link. It's basically just not quite as good as the other players. Linebackers, Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese, probably your top 2 drafted linebackers in the NFL draft next year. Reese is a great pass rusher. Styles is a former DB, so they have unique skill sets. And then you go to the back end. Downs, McLean at safety, Egbinosun at corner. If there's a weakness, it's probably Styles in the slot or Matthews in the boundary. That would be the matchup I would try to get Tony on, but that's a lot easier said than done. I kind of think the advantages lie with Ohio State in this particular matchup. They're just deeper on defense. And Miami has 2 skill players you fear. Can someone step up that's not Fletcher or Tony? That's a big question. Now, on the other side, Julian Sands, 78% completion, 9.3 yards per attempt, only 6 turnover-worthy plays and 13 sacks. What an amazing season. Now, he wasn't tested maybe as much as you'd like, given that weak Big Ten schedule outside of really 2 or 3 games. So one hole is this offensive line. They're a top 25 unit on paper. Are they actually, though? This unit, it had trouble against Indiana. They had to bench a guard in their game, Shabola. He got benched for Van Sickle. Their tackles are good. They're not great. Searvelt and Philip Daniels. This is a big question. And it's affected their personnel usage. I've been very critical of their usage of 12 personnel. You have Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Okay, those 2 never leave the field. That makes sense. Smith over 1,000 yards. Tate would have been if he didn't get hurt. Max Clare probably should play. But then you use Ohio transfer blocking tight end Will Kasmerick over 50% of the time when you have a stable of 5-star receivers. Why is that? I kind of think it's because they don't trust their offensive line. I've been very critical of this. I think they should go 3 wide and use their 5 stars. It's a bigger mismatch than Kasmerick. But I honestly kind of think this is a we don't trust our offensive line. And in this game, when you're facing Ruben Bain and Nakeem Mesidor, you're probably going to see a fair amount of 12 personnel. So that's a semi-concern, this offensive line. But the run game has gotten better. Bo Jackson, since he's kind of taken over 1,000 yards, 19 catches. The run game has been fine for Ohio State. But we talked about the edges for Miami. That's going to be key to this game. Ruben Bain and Mesidor, can they get pressure? They've disappeared in some games. Quick game from Louisville really affected their ability to rush the passer, teams that got the ball out fast. Ohio State doesn't always do that, so we'll see if they can figure out that game plan. Inside, David Blaine, Armando Blount, they're going to rotate with Moton and Scott. It's a pretty good defensive line. But one place you can take advantage of Miami is this linebacking room. Wesley Bissentine is solid enough, but Motore is their worst player on defense, and he is a liability in coverage. You probably want to maybe use Kasmerick and Clare in some packages at least to try to get one of them on Motore. The secondary's gotten better, and they have a lot of really highly recruited players like Fitzgerald. Keontae Scott at defensive back came back from injury and played awesome against A&M, forced that fumble on the strip sack. The only weak link has really been O.J. Frederick. We'll see if Ohio State can exploit that. I think they probably can, but I'm not sure who Miami's going to use because you have to probably take some DBs off the field. They play a ton of nickel and dime, but you can't really do that against the 12 personnel. So I'm really curious to see what Miami does. Ultimately, that's probably another advantage for Ohio State, just their ability to morph their offense. Special teams favors Ohio State. Miami had some kicking problems. Blame that on the wind if you want. It's just not a secure unit. Ohio State certainly is better. We make this outside 10. So I'm going to debate this. Like a couple other games more, and the schedule for Ohio State does worry me a bit after what we saw them do against Indiana. They just haven't been tested as much. But that's where we stand. Don't show any value in the total. Make that a 49. So that is where we will side in this game. But thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. We'll come back for the games tomorrow. But until then, Good luck, everyone. We will see you later.